Hello all the serial pagloos. Today we are talking about ये रिश्ते हैं प्यार के, which is the extended version of ये रिश्ता क्या कहलाता है. This show needs to be talked because it was one of those rare TV shows that actually felt like magic. At a time when Indian television was overflowing with exaggerated drama, evil conspiracies and repetitive saas-bahu conflicts, this show arrived like a breath of fresh air. It brought warmth, emotionally layered characters, soft storytelling and relationships that felt imperfect yet real. The biggest strength of the show was not just its romance but its emotional writing in the early phase. The audience connected deeply with the characters because they were flawed without being toxic. The biggest strength of the show was that its character, they were flawed but without being toxic. Abir, played by Shahir Sheikh, became one of the most loved male leads of ITV because he was written differently. He was supportive, emotionally intelligent, understanding and respectful, qualities rarely explored properly in mainstream television heroes. Instead of controlling Mishti, he stood beside her. He listened, reassured and encouraged her individuality. That made Abir feel refreshing and modern while still emotionally rooted. Misty, portrayed by Riya Sharma, also stood apart from typical ITV heroines. She came from a broken emotional background and constantly struggled between belonging and abandonment. Yet she wasn't written as helpless. She was impressive, independent, caring, and someone who genuinely tried to heal relationships around her. Her journey felt relatable because she carried emotional scars while still wanting love and stability. Then there was Kunal, played by Ritwik Arora, probably one of the most misunderstood characters in the show. Kunal was never evil, he was emotionally manipulated. Raised under Meenakshi's influence, he genuinely believed he was protecting his family by obeying her. His innocence and emotional dependence made him tragic rather than hateful. That complexity added depth to the storytelling during the first season. Kuhu, played by Kaveri Priyam, opposite to Kunal, was often misunderstood by the audience because she was not written as the ideal ITV sister. She was insecure, impulsive, attention-seeking and sometimes selfish. But those flaws made her realistic. Unlike Mishti, who naturally became everyone's emotional priority, Kuhu constantly felt overshadowed, even within the family. Comparison between the sisters silently damaged her confidence. She wanted validation, love, and importance, but often expressed it through jealousy or immature reactions. Kuhu was interesting because she wasn't malicious at heart. She loved deeply, especially Kunal, but her fear of losing affection made her defensive. Then comes Meenakshi Rajwansh, played brilliantly by Rupal Patel. She was one of the strongest ITV matriarchs because she wasn't evil in one-dimensional way. Everything she did comes from obsession disguised as protection. She genuinely loved her family, especially Abir and Kunal. But her love was controlling, possessive and manipulative. She believed only she knew what was best for everyone. Meenakshi's biggest complexity was that she feared losing control more than losing relationships. Her entire personality was built around maintaining family structure she had created. That's why she constantly interfered in the relationships of their son, be it Abir or Mishti or Kunal or Kuhu. And she emotionally controlled Kunal. She wasn't driven by hatred, she was driven by fear, insecurity and emotional dependency on her son. And Kunal became an extension of her emotional needs rather than his own individual person. What truly made the show special initially was its atmosphere. The music, the soft cinematography, the family dynamics, the Gujarati culture touch, and the emotional conversations made the audience emotionally invested. The conflicts felt grounded instead of over dramatic. Even when characters made mistakes, the emotions made sense. But then comes the downfall. Like many ITV shows, the COVID period changed the direction drastically. The storytelling lost its emotional realism and slowly became dependent on forced twists and repetitive suffering. One of the biggest mistakes was the Mishti thinks she murdered someone drag. It felt disconnected from the soul of the show. Instead of emotional family drama, the narrative suddenly became unnecessary, dark, and dramatic. The writing stopped trusting simple emotions and started chasing shock values. Then next comes the surrogacy track. It further damaged the emotional balance of the story. Instead of handling sensitive issues with maturity, the show turned them into prolonged melodrama. The conflict between the sisters also hurt the essence of what made the show lovable in the first place. Earlier relationships felt layered and healing. Later they became repetitive cycles of misunderstandings, sacrifices, guilt, and emotional breakdowns. The repetition slowly erased the charm the season 1 had built so beautifully. The freshness disappeared because the characters no longer behaved like themselves. Amir's emotional intelligence weakened, Mishti's growth became inconsistent, and several plotlines felt stretched purely for drama rather than character development. The audience that once loved the emotional simplicity of the show began feeling disconnected. In many ways, ये रिश्ते हैं प्यार के remains memorable not because of how it ended, but because of what it once was. For a brief period, it proved that ITV could create emotionally mature male leads, layered female protagonists, and relationship-driven storytelling without depending entirely on toxicity. The ending of ये रिश्ते हैं प्यार के felt extremely rushed because the show never got the time to properly resolve its emotional arcs. After COVID, the TRP declined, storytelling and storylines became inconsistent, and eventually the makers had to wrap everything up quickly. As a result, many characters' journeys that deserved gradual closure were suddenly fixed within a few episodes. The biggest example was Meenakshi's transformation. Throughout the show, she was portrayed as deeply controlling, emotionally manipulative, obsessed with protecting her family according to her own rules. Her behavior came from years of fear, insecurity, and emotional dependency and conditions that led to her character. But near the end, her change happened too suddenly. Within a very short span, she accepted Mishti, softened towards everyone, and almost entirely dropped the emotional control that had defined her character for so long. The issue was not that she changed, but redemption could have been beautiful, but the writing did not give enough emotional build-up for it. Viewers wanted to see her genuinely confront her mistakes, understand the damage she caused to her son and to her sons and to their family, and slowly rebuild the relationships with her daughter-in-laws. But the show abruptly closed, and the transition felt so abrupt, and the show rushing towards its closure. The hasty ending is one of the reasons many fans still remember the earlier phases more profoundly and more beautifully. If you like my analysis, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you.